Hi, my name is Cliff Hastings, and welcome to the Hands-On Start to Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition overview. If you're new to Notebook Edition or need a refresher, you're in the right place. Today, we're going to go over the basics of using Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition. So let's go ahead and open up the software on your machine so that you can work alongside with me and create your first notebook as well. When you first start up Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition, you should see a welcome screen that looks like this. Click on the red New Document to create a new notebook. Now let's start by typing in a basic arithmetic computation. So let's go ahead and type 14 plus 71. Now as you can see, Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition created a new input cell, and now we're going to press Enter, and the result is displayed in a new output cell. Let's go ahead and do one more. Let's type 5. And then the exponent or caret 3, so 5 to the third power, hit enter, and we get that result. Now, this is a quick start at doing some basic computations, and we now see input and output cells, but we also want to make a notebook which looks like a document with a title and sections and text. So let's go ahead and take our mouse and we'll click at the very top of the notebook to create a new I-beam. Now this I-beam illustrates the place in the notebook where you're ready to start a new cell, whether that's input or text, etc. So let's click the plus symbol on the left of the I-beam. This is called the Cell Insertion Assistant, and that lets us choose the type of cell we want to insert. If you choose title, a new title cell appears. So let's call this document Hands-On Start. Now let's create a new section cell. So we'll click between that title cell and the first input cell, and the new I-beam appears. This lets us know we're ready again to create a new cell. So click on that Cell Insertion Assistant, and this time let's choose Section, and we'll call this section Basic Calculations. The Cell Insertion Assistant isn't the only way to enter new cells, and we can also move in our notebook with the up and down arrow keys. So let's go ahead and move up and back down, so move up and down, but we'll move under the Basic Calculations section to note we're ready to start typing, which is again illustrated by that I-beam. Now to enter more text, this time we'll do a subsection. Let's go to the menu bar, we'll choose Format, then Style. Then you can see a variety of different cell styles to choose from. Let's go ahead and select Subsection, and then we will call this Arithmetic. Now let's add another input cell, and we'll type, so we'll click Make a New I-beam, and we'll type 16 divided by 72. And when we evaluate that with the enter, we get a reduced fraction. If we provide Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition with an exact input, it then returns an exact output. And if we want to do a numerical approximation, we can specify that we want to calculate that fraction, for example, to 3 digits, and Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition will enter a numeric calculation. So we'll type 16 over 72 to 3 digits. Now, as you might already imagine, Notebook Edition requires an internet connection. So when you enter an input in plain English and hit enter, it sends that string of text to our servers. It parses that input to a Wolfram language equivalent, and then it returns that output. So the calculation is always running on your local machine. The only thing that happens over the internet is to change your English input into the Wolfram language equivalent. Because it displays the exact Wolfram language syntax below your input, over time, you'll start to recognize the patterns of the syntax and eventually learn the basics of the Wolfram language. So if you know you're going to start with Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition, but eventually use Mathematica, like at a university, for example, this will teach you how to use Mathematica and the Wolfram language over time. With that said, though, of course, you don't have to pay attention to the Wolfram language syntax. In fact, you can choose to hide it if you prefer. Under the Appearance menu, there's a global setting to hide Wolfram language inputs, and then for your notebook, that makes the Wolfram language equivalents go away. Let's go ahead and do another calculation. So we'll say, I'll type pi to 100 digits, and then press enter. And again, like the previous one, it shows me the input, the Wolfram language equivalent. So again, going forward, it shows me my Wolfram language, and then it shows that result. All right, let's go ahead and scroll to the bottom of our notebook, and we'll go ahead and click to make that new I-beam. We'll go up to Format, then Style, and we'll again select Subsection, and then we'll call this subsection Variables and Defining Functions. One thing we may want to do is to define a variable. So in a new input cell, if I type in set B equals 5, and then evaluate, every time I now use B, Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition will remember the value, at least until I tell it to clear that variable or restart the software. So now if I type B squared B caret 2 plus 5B, and I evaluate that, we're going to get a numeric result because Notebook Edition knows that B equals 5. To clear that variable, we can go ahead and type unset B and press enter, and then when I do more calculations, B is going to be a symbol with no value assigned to it. So one important thing to note is that the calculations and the definitions are not dependent on the order of the page, but instead on the order of the evaluations. So right now I have evaluated unset B, and you'll note the previous result does not automatically change. But if I evaluate B squared plus 5B again, then it returns B squared plus 5B because there is no specific value assigned to B. If I reset B to 5, and then reevaluate B squared plus 5B, I again get the numeric value. So again, it's important to note that when you are assigning variables, it's not the order in which they appear on the page, it's the order that they were evaluated that is important. The other thing you may want to do is define a function. So we can say set f of x equal to x squared plus 2x plus 2, and then hit enter. Now that we've set that definition, we can do things like calculate f of 5 and hit enter, which is 37. Or we can use the shorthand notation for a derivative to calculate the derivative of f of x. Or we may want to substitute a specific value and say the derivative of f of x, so f prime x, where x equals 10. So we're going to calculate the derivative and swap in that value of 10 to get the numeric result of 22. Now, up to this point, I've been doing single calculations, but this is an example where we're calculating two things at one time, something that Wolfram Alpha Pro is not very good at, but Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition handles this very nicely. Let's go ahead and we'll define a function that has two inputs. So we can say set g of x comma y equal to x to the y power, and hit enter. And then if we calculate what is g of 10 comma 10, it will calculate 10 to the 10th power and give us a numeric result back. Being able to define a variable or a function can come in very handy, especially if you have a longer calculation so you don't have to retype it multiple times. When creating sections and subsections earlier, I have used the Cell Insertion Assistant, and I have also used the toolbar. Now let's go back up to the toolbar and select Format and Style again to make another subsection. Now, instead of clicking subsection, note that it illustrates the keyboard shortcut. So I'm going to go back to my notebook where my I-beam is down at the bottom. I'm going to scroll down a little bit, and I'm going to hit Alt-5. And then I'm going to type algebra as my new subsection. Now, I'm going to hit the down arrow key, make a new input cell, and I'm going to type graph y equals 2x minus 2. And then hit enter to run that calculation. And now I get this nice plot of that line. So what if you want to graph multiple equations on the same set of axes? Well, let's just go ahead and type graph y equals 2x squared minus 2, and y equals 2x minus 2, and hit enter. And simply enough, You will not only see the graphs, but you'll also see that Notebook Edition has nicely chosen colors to differentiate the two, as well as providing an easy-to-read legend as well. Now, for this calculation, let's do another one. I want to type in a new input cell, solve 2x minus 2 equals 0 for x. When I press enter to calculate, I get the result of x is 1. Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition is key for high school and college algebra courses, but it's also integral for calculus as well. Get it? Integral. Okay, so my comedy skills aren't matching my math skills, so we'll move on, but I thought I'd try. So let's go ahead and hit Alt-4 on our keyboards. So we'll get a new section cell, and we'll type suggestions. Now, besides creating sections and subsections, you can also intersperse text throughout your notebook. So let's say I want to add some text below my last calculation. I can click the Cell Insertion Assistant, choose Plain Text, and type, "Here are some examples in calculus, linear algebra, and algebra." And just like any word processing software, you can do things like, let's bold the word sum. So we'll highlight sum and hit Control-B on your keyboard, for example. Or you can double-click examples and you can italicize. Or we can double-click on calculus and we can go up to format and size, and we can change that to be larger. And let's double-click on linear algebra or highlight that and select linear algebra, and then go up to, again, format, and we'll go text color, and we'll change that to red. All the things under the format menu, you can edit, you can modify your text with sizes, shapes, colors, those sorts of things. So while we're talking about how your notebook looks, if you want to change the magnification of the document on Windows, you'll find a drop-down menu in the lower right-hand corner that you can use to make the entire document larger. On Mac, it's in the upper right-hand corner. So this is particularly useful if you're giving a presentation, so it's easy for your audience to see what you're doing, both inputs, outputs, and text. Now, let's go ahead and click below our text, and we'll start a new input cell. So let's calculate our first integral by typing integral of cosine of 2x, and hit enter. You'll notice after solving this integral, a suggestions bar appears with a button that says Related Computations. When I click on this, it gives me a large set of suggestions for what I might want to do next. Maybe I want to calculate the definite integral from 0 to infinity, or calculate the derivative, or I might want to invert a function or even plot it. I think plotting sounds nice, so let's go ahead and plot the original function as well as the integral. When I click on this, it creates a new Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition input cell that returns a really nice plot of both cosine of 2x, which was the original equation, as well as the integral. Now let's calculate a derivative. So I'm going to type in a new input cell. I'm going to type derivative of the quantity x plus 1 squared, and then press enter. And the result is 2 times the quantity x plus 1. In addition to offering related computations, the suggestions bar also offers step-by-step solutions. This is a popular feature to illustrate the mechanics of solving these mathematical problems, or even just to check that the result you came up with is correct. So when I click on step-by-step solution, a new cell is created, which shows the original problem of the derivative of 1 plus x quantity squared, and we are given now 2 choices. We can either show the steps one at a time, or we can show the steps all at once. So if you're wanting to check if your result is correct, you can show all values and view the answer. But I want to make sure I understand how to calculate this derivative, so let's together click on the Show Next Step button. For this problem, it shows us that the chain rule is the most common way to solve it, And we can click through the steps to start to differentiate the sum term by term, then simplify the expression, and eventually see the answer at the bottom. So after clicking through those steps, we see that result is 2 times the sum of 1 plus x. As you can see, this maps very nicely with Common Math textbooks, and it's like having a real-time TA to work through it with you to help you confirm your knowledge or troubleshoot where you've gone wrong. If you know you want to see the steps to solve a problem, you can also type that in directly from the start. So let's, in a new input cell, type steps for derivative of quantity x plus 1 squared, and hit enter. So as we see, we get the same step-by-step calculations as we got previously, where we can either show each step or we can show all steps at one time. Let's move on to a linear algebra example. So we'll, in a new input cell, type determinant of the quantity of the subquantity 1, 2, and 3, 4, and then hit enter to calculate, and we get a result of -2. Now, just like the derivative above, Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition gives us the option to see the step-by-step solution, and again, we can either see the steps one by one, or we can show all steps through to the final solution for that determinant. Now, let's return to algebra momentarily and solve a system of equations. So in a new input cell, we'll type solve quantity 2x plus 3y equals 40, and then comma, and we'll do another equation. We'll say y minus x equals 5, close the parenthesis, and then we'll say for x and y. Now, when I hit enter, I get the solution of x equals 5 and y equals 10. But the point I want to illustrate is here again, with step-by-step solutions, we can show the steps for this calculation as well. And as you can see, when I click show all steps, each step has a very uniform look and feel, no matter what you're trying to solve with Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition. Now, you may not want to see the suggestions bar options for related calculations or the step-by-step solutions. So we have built an option for you where if you go up to the top and select Hide Query Details, Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition will only show the input and the result without those additional suggestions for what to do next. If at a later time you want to see those again, you can reselect that option and the suggestions bar will reappear. Now, let's click on, let's go to the bottom of our notebook. We're going to click to make a new I-beam, and then we'll go up to the cell insertion assistant to the left, and we'll make a new section, and we'll call this section graphics. So let's retype an input we used a while ago in our first graphic example. We will type, so we'll hit the down arrow key in a new cell. We'll type graph y equals 2x minus 2 and hit enter. Now, once we get that graphic, we can do another new input cell. We can also change some elements of the graphics by simply typing the things we'd like to modify. For example, if I go, let's actually go ahead and copy and paste the previous input. So I'll copy that, click my mouse, and then hit paste. And then I'm going to add just the words thick at the end, thick red, and then hit enter. Now I get the same graphic, but I get it with a thicker red line instead of that thinner black line as above. And like general calculations, graphics work with the same way in providing you related computations that you might want to select based on what Notebook Edition suggests. For example, again, let's copy and paste the initial graphic input. And we will go ahead and calculate that and hit enter. Then let's select from related computations the option that says find the limit at x equals 0. And we should get a result of -2. which we can also see visually on the graphic up above. We can also make interactive graphics in Notebook Edition by simply adding a varying statement to note which variables should have sliders to vary. So in another new input cell, let's type graph, y equals 2 plus sign quantity a times x squared minus 2, comma, and then I'll say varying a from 1 to 5, and then hit enter. So with this, now I should get a model where if I scroll to the right, for example, we can see how that sine curve changes as I move that slider. We can also open up the little plus symbol, and that provides us a sort of remote control for this model. So if I'm showing this on the screen in my classroom, I want to walk away from it, I can have it play, and I can pause it again at some point where I want to. We have full control over that model. You can make a number of different sliders and drop downs, just like you can in Wolfram Language and Mathematica, but where with Wolfram Language, the function is manipulate, where you see that in the Wolfram Language equivalent. For Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition, we use the word varying. Now let's create our first 3D graphic. In a new input cell, we're going to type plot sine of x times cosine of y. We'll type a comma, and we'll say x from 0 to 4 pi and y from 0 to 2 pi. And hit enter to do that calculation. So not only are we creating a surface plot, but we're actually specifying some values for the x and y axes, so our plot has a certain look and feel. Now to rotate your 3D plot, click your mouse on the plot and drag it around the screen. You can zoom in and out. You can hold down Control while you drag your mouse, or you can hold Shift and drag your mouse to pan it around the screen as well. So you have 3 different ways to interact with these 3-dimensional plots. Let's do another new input cell. So I'll click my mouse or use the down arrow key to make a new I-beam. I'm gonna type contour, and then I'll just copy and paste everything from above. So instead of doing a 3-dimensional graphic this time, I'm gonna do a contour plot or a contour graphic of the exact same input. So I'll hit the enter key, and then I'll get that resulting contour graphic also. Now if I mouse over the edges of that contour plot, we can see the value of each of those lines within this contour graphic. Let's do another new input cell. We can create a table of data by saying table of x squared, comma, x from 0 to 100. And hit enter. We can then refer to the previous output by using the percent sign, or if you see each input and output has a number next to it, so we could use percent sign like 45 or 46 or whatever the output we're referring to is as well. So in this new input, we're just going to type graph percent sign. So graph space percent sign, and that says graph the previous output, which is the list of those numbers. So we get this nice list plot graphic here. In addition, we can create statistical charts with Notebook Edition. So let's make a new input cell, and I'm going to type pie chart of, and then parenthesis, I'm going to add some values. So we'll say 2, 3, 6, 10, 10, and 10. And then close the parenthesis and hit enter. And like with the contour plot, I can mouse over the sections to see the numeric values, and I can click on any of these to break them out from that pie chart. So not only do the charts look nice, but they're also interactive as well. Now let's copy and paste this data set. So let's go ahead and actually just copy it. In a new input cells, I need to make an I-beam. I'll click my mouse or use the down arrow key, and then make a new input cell, and I'm going to type histogram of, and then paste that data set, and then we get that histogram back. So it shows me there are 3 values between 10 and 15, one value between 5 and 10, and two values between 0 and 5. Let's go ahead and move down in our notebook. Now for our to last section, let's hit the down arrow key to make that I-beam, and I'm going to press Alt-4 to make a new section, and I'm going to type special characters will be the name of this section. Now, so far, I've entered mostly everything using plain everyday English, but you also have access to a set of special characters that you can use for common mathematical calculations. When I click this button up here, a keyboard appears with a bunch of special characters. So Greek characters, pi, infinity, square root, integral, summation, etc. Now let's calculate an integral by using this integral sign. So I'm going to take my mouse, click on make a new I-beam so it's ready for an input cell. I'm going to click on the integral symbol, and then I'm going to type cosine parenthesis 2x, and then close that parenthesis and hit enter, and then I run that calculation for the integral. Let's do another input cell. I'm going to click on pi and say pi to 100 digits. We did this calculation earlier, just typing the word pi, but we see the same thing works with that special character. Or we can do another input. So the special characters keyboard also has Greek characters like alpha and beta, and those can be used as variables just like x and y. So if I type in limit of 1 divided by, and then I'll click on beta, as beta, so I'll click on that again, approaches infinity. So I'll click on the infinity symbol and then hit enter to get that calculation done as well. And I get a result of 0. So these special characters and special functions can help make your inputs more closely resemble what you'd find in a textbook. And then if you want to hide that keyboard, click the button again, and the special characters keyboard goes away. So you can toggle that on and off whenever you would like. Now, there are also some palettes to assist with writing notebooks or quizzes or lectures, that sort of thing. So if we go up to the toolbar and choose Format, and then Style, and then Text, and then I'm going to select Palettes and Writing Assistant, we can go ahead and write some 2D text where I might want to say, in this text cell, I'm going to write question number 1, and then a colon. Solve for x. And then I'm going to click the fraction, and then say 4. And then I can use the tab key, or I can go ahead and use my mouse to go to the denominator and hit x. And then I'm going to either tab out of the denominator or use the right arrow key or mouse. Any of those work the same to get to a big flashing insert bar. And then I can type plus 1 equals 3, question mark. So anyway, the point is you can type two-dimensional text or use a lot of things for your writing and formatting or different typesetting that you want to use, like fractions, square roots, matrices, exponents. There's a lot of options available to you in this writing and typesetting palette to make it look how you want to look, like a math textbook. All right, let's go back to our notebook. And we will click to make a new I-beam below that text question. So we are ready to start a new input cell or whatever type of cell we want to make. Now let's go ahead and make our final section. I'm going to click underneath my question text to make a new horizontal I-beam. I can hit Alt-4 to make a new section, and we'll call this slideshows. Now up to this point, I've been working in a regular notebook. However, as a teacher wanting to do a presentation for my class, I may want to start with a presenter notebook instead. So if I go up to the File menu, under New, you can see there are two choices here. One is a regular notebook that we've been using. The other is a presenter notebook. And presenter notebooks are great because they allow you to create a notebook that can be used as a slideshow. I've clicked on Presenter Notebook, and I get a very nice pre-built template. I could make my own from scratch, but let's go ahead and just use this template as a good example to get started with. Now let's go ahead and scroll down. I'm going to make a new horizontal I-beam after slide 4. And then I'm going to click this button to insert a new slide. Let's go ahead and hit Alt-4 again to make a new section. And at the start of this slide, I'm going to call this section Limits. Let's now go back to our original notebook. I want to copy and paste our last input last limit input. So I'm going to copy, go back to our presenter notebook, and then paste that as a new input, and then again hit enter on that. All right, great. Now, after I'm done creating the slideshow, when I'm ready to start the presentation, I'm going to click on the blue button that says Start Presentation. Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition then changes to slideshow view and automatically switches to full screen mode. To move forward through the slides, press the right arrow button, and to move backwards, of course, you can hit the left arrow button, and that takes us, for example, let's move to our new slide. So here we are with this new limit slide we created. The nice thing about Notebook Edition is that unlike other slideshow software, you can recalculate anything during the presentation and make changes on the fly. So I can change the previous equation to, let's say, quantity 1 divided by beta. So I'll put parentheses around 1 over beta. And then at the end, close parenthesis, I'm going to type +1 and then recalculate this thing. And now I should get a result of 1 instead of 0. So because you can change the parameters of the calculations on the fly, as you respond to questions from a class, your presentation can be interactive and evolve as people ask questions. So instead of displaying a set of static images, when you use Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition, the audience can see changes happen in real time and participate in an active discussion, which makes your presentation way more dynamic and engaging. Now let's go ahead and wrap up by saving our notebooks. So I can go up to File menu, choose Save As, and save this presentation notebook under a different name. So let's call this one Slideshow. And we'll save that to the desktop. And let's go back to our initial notebook. And I want to save this also. So File, Save As, and we'll just call this Hands-on Start is fine. And we'll save that to the desktop as well. So we've come to the end of the tutorial. I hope you've enjoyed creating your first notebook with me in Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at cliffh@wolfram.com. Thank you so much for joining and working along with me during this seminar.